It goes without saying that American society today is blatantly rigged against one group and one group only: white Americans. It would have been unimaginable a few generations ago that the native people of America would become the minority in their own country, let alone be the people who are actively opposed and oppressed by the very institutions that were created to protect them. But that unimaginable nightmare has now become a very imaginable reality. Through the decades, as the Marxist and globalist forces hauled their way in the long march through the institutions, they systematically turned our country against us. They then shipped tens of millions of non-whites to indoctrinate and keep the hate alive. But as deplorable as our system has become, it's the people running it that I hold overwhelming contempt for. It's the people behind it that should first and foremost be called out. So what can be said about those orchestrating the anti-white power structure? Who are the people pumping the anti-white poison into the system? From the way I see it, it really comes down to three major groups: the colored masses, the white allies, and the ruling class. As for the colored masses, these are what you would call the common folks, the ordinary members among the minority class. These people, I believe, are part of the rebellion against America and Western civilization entirely for two primary reasons: vengeance and envy. Vengeance because of perceived crimes and injustices they claim were carried out against them by Europeans in past centuries. And envy because throughout history, especially modern history, white countries have been the most successful, prosperous, and advanced countries in human history. Even narrowing it down to the past few decades, whites have been ahead of blacks in nearly every aspect of society, including education, financial success, stable families, and low crime.
I'm a black man being terrorized by this fucking Klansman right here. We are terrorized by the Grand Wizard. Y'all got the Grand Wizard living in your goddamn neighborhood. Oh, the Klan exists in Hugo, Minnesota, and it's right here. Don't run now. Don't run now, racist white people. I'm here. Oh yeah, we pull up. We pull the fuck up. Treat us like shit and acting like we ain't comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable getting my ass kicked by you coward ass white motherfuckers in uniform. And if you are comfortable with my voice, do something about it. We coming. We coming for everything that you motherfuckers took from us. We coming for them seats. We coming for the money you owe us. We coming for this. Wait a minute. This whole goddamn state burned down for 20 goddamn dollars. You think we gonna fuck about burning Hugo down?
All this despite being generations past slavery and Jim Crow. All this despite being showered with all kinds of programs and benefits. All this despite the racial and evolutionary differences between whites and blacks. These and other key factors that contribute to the black-white disparity are blotted out when assessing history. Yet these people fail to recognize or conveniently ignore the fact that all of human history is a story of endless tribal warfare. Every single race, every single group of people have committed some sort of atrocity of which they can be branded guilty for today. But it's only the white man who must bear the burden of the crimes of which all peoples took part in to some degree, often in even more of a brutal fashion than Europeans could have ever done. What a coincidence it is, though, that the group of people that created and inherited the richest, most developed, and most powerful countries in the world, white countries, are repeatedly bullied into coughing up land, resources, power, and an endless flow of money in the form of government benefits, welfare, and reparations. We are pressured into doing all of this to atone for our past sins, lest we be called that most terrifying of all words, racist. As for the white liberals and white allies, this sect would be the second most reprehensible among the three, the first being the ruling class. I know many in the nationalist community consider this group to be the most despicable because of their ignorance and their betrayal. And in many cases, they are indeed truly contemptible, and there are a lot of them out there. But as much contempt as I may hold for these lost souls, I want to be fair in my assessment. We have to understand what really drives a large slice of our people to act against themselves and their own kind. I would break these fools up into 3 separate categories, each being worse than the other: the soulless, the brainwashed, and the race traitors. When it comes to the soulless whites, while I actually have much pity for them, I believe they joined this rebellion having zero knowledge about what its true objectives are and what is really at stake. This is, in large part, due to modernity. I think they're merely attempting to fill in the significant parts of their lives that have gone missing, even if it leads to their own individual and collective downfall. But however loathsome their choices and actions are, I will be understanding towards them. When we put things into a modern perspective, one can begin to realize that most, if not all of these people are indeed soulless. They're blown around like leaves in the wind, blindly being led by the whims of popular culture. They lack any intrinsic meaning or cause in their lives. We now live in a post-Christian and post-racial West, where money, trendy fads, and material junk fills the void. These lost souls have been stripped of major and necessary purposes and identities, such as race, family, and faith, that would otherwise give someone a sense of fulfillment and pride in their lives. And then we have the brainwashed. These are the soy boys and pussy hat gals, the type of people you'd find in your university's whiteness studies and queer theory class. They have their heads overflowing with the idea of how they and their kind are inherently evil and are to blame for everything that has ever gone wrong for anyone non-white, even if they took no part in it themselves. This portion actively engages in the anti-white movement, from spending hours a day on social media apologizing for their white privilege, to holding up signs and chanting BLM-approved slogans, to marching in the streets Antifa style. They submit themselves to the will of the colored masses and their endless, vicious demands. They make it their life's mission to help the so-called oppressed achieve liberation, and to do what must be done to compensate for their perceived original sin, a sin which they will never be forgiven for. For this bunch, I think there are 2 reasons that accounts for their such devoted commitment to advancing the anti-white agenda. One is to feel virtuous about themselves, because they have been thoroughly convinced that they are the ones to blame for the plight of the minorities. They feel the need to reconcile themselves, and in the process, feel good about having done their one good deed for the day. The other reason, which is truly laughable, is to save their own skin from the wrath of the anti-white machine. But of course, their skin will not be saved, because their skin is the ultimate trophy of this revolution. They cannot be saved from a machine that is color-coded to hunt down and root out one specific color and annihilate it. These fools don't realize that they are the one and only targets on the agenda they serve. They are on the losing side. But soon enough, reality will hit them in the head, and it will hit these people especially hard. Whether it's hard enough to make the cogs in their brain start turning, one can only hope. But by then, there will be nowhere to hide. In the end, these people will get exactly what they deserve. Finally, we come to the race traitors. These whites are equivalent of the Al Sharptons and Jesse Jacksons of America, the race hustlers. Many of them participate in the anti-white movement to appear trendy or to cash out in the billions in funding dumped into this cause, and it is indeed a very lucrative business. Without shame, they betray their race and hand our countries over to the mobs already demanding to take them. The more powerful and influential within this group are complicit in delivering us into the hands of the global elites. I fully share in the disgust our community has towards these people. May they get the ultimate punishment for their treachery. And lastly, we have the ruling class. These are the people that pull the strings. These are the people who make the radical changes to our societies, in most cases without our vote. Because they usually reside in positions of power and influence, you won't find these people marching on the streets alongside Antifa. Their moves are much more subtle and calculated. These are the elites that usually stay behind closed doors and don't make much noise. Some among this class would include high-ranking politicians, donors, the uber-wealthy, massive corporate entities, and international agencies. Broadly speaking, this is the class of people that are expected to look out for the good of our nations and our people, but instead have sacrificed us for the coming new globalist world order. I would argue that there is one central motive for all their treachery, and that is to sustain power over the system and over the people. And one thing is for sure, these people will stop at nothing to maintain their power, even if it means killing the goose that laid the golden egg, for it is wholly in their interest to keep the system they designed running for as long as possible, lest they lose their power. And what better way to maintain power over an entire civilization than to keep your people in a vulnerable state, distracted, demoralized, and unable to unite as one people to resist their coming demise? And why not break down resistance even further, by throwing in a tangle of squabbling nationalities that despise your people and wage endless conflicts against them? Divide and conquer. Mark my words, this anti-white system is marked in blood. This system is not going to stop at just the discrimination of which schools we don't get admitted to, or which type of job we don't get. I'm talking about our people being rounded up in masses and sent off to re-education camps, and death squads patrolling the streets, looking for any excuse to cut you down in cold blood. And I promise you, this is no exaggeration.
The victim does appear to be a white man, and the Associated Press is reporting this morning that the man was wearing a hat with the insignia of a far-right group called Patriot Prayer.
And tonight, I just got word the person who died was a Patriot Prayer person. He was a fucking Nazi. Our community held its own and took out the trash. I am not going to shed any tears over a Nazi.
When we already have prominent people in the system who openly chant about eliminating whiteness, who fund social and scientific research to find cures for racism, who label our white babies as perpetuations of white supremacy, and talk about us whites as being inferiors and savages because of the lack of melanin in our skin. When you have entire generations being indoctrinated to believe that white people are evil, and to view white people as the sole obstacle to their rainbow paradise. All these without any fear of backlash. We know all too well what actions follow this sort of rhetoric. When they relentlessly perpetuate the same lies on such a massive scale, people will eventually come to swallow them, even much of our own. And as our numbers continue to diminish, as our globalist ruling class continues to import millions of foreigners, as the poisonous anti-white narrative is ramped up ever more, expect our already dire situation to become more and more brutal and grim. We need to stop trying to survive in the anti-white system, and instead start trying to break away from it. We have only but our lives to save and our freedom to gain.